Hey, Paul.
Hey Fab, how's it going?
Good yourself?
Good. Yeah, really
Cool.
good.
Nice. Um, so today I wanted to kind of talk about prospecting. I think it's something that I still see reps struggling with. So I thought maybe we can kind of. I know we've had a few topics, and even recently we sat with Alyssa and talking about like how to create content as a salesperson and stuff like that. So there's definitely some good. We've talked about this quite a bit. But yeah, I think it's a topic that needs to be uh, rediscovered, so to speak. Um,
Or how about continuously discussed?
Continues to discuss. Yeah, that's that's a good way to put it. I was trying to find a better way to
Yeah.
put it, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I find like it's probably the part of sales that um, reps still struggle with. I won't say the most because I mean I think there's a lot of different parts of sales that are difficult, but um, from what I see, prospecting is still kind of went up there in terms of difficulty. I see a lot of people relying on inbound. I see a lot of people relying on growing existing accounts, which are all great. Don't get me wrong, but I still find that sometimes the end of the month comes up and pipelines are relatively dry, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but not a lot of solutions for it.
Yeah.
So before we get started, I guess like help us maybe understand, like in your point of view, um, what would the importance of prospecting? Like, why is it so important?
Well, I think obviously, the obvious stuff is if you don't prospect, you're not filling up the pipeline of potential clients. And a lot of people, when they're doing well, they forget to do their prospecting activities. And then a couple of months later, well, after all the business that they've had dries up, they're like, oh man, what's going on? So maintaining maintaining continuous activity in your prospecting really helps in maintaining the pipe drive. Sorry, the pipeline. Sorry, HubSpot. Um, so it's the pipeline of potential clients needs to be continuously fed. The problem with human beings, and I think it's a psychological thing, is we have a hard time seeing ahead. Right? We have a hard time
Hmm.
doing things now that are going to reward us later. You know that what's that little thing, the little test they do with young kids there? They put one cookie or one marshmallow in front of them and they say, if you're able to wait 10 minutes to eat this marshmallow, you'll get a second one. A lot of them just eat they're incapable of waiting. Well, it's sort of the same thing with prospecting. If you don't build and work now for future success, it's going to go down. So that's one thing. The other thing is prospecting is hard
Yeah.
because you're going to do 10 activity items to have sometimes just one successful continual success on things. So you'll do, for example, 10 calls to have one person answer you. Sometimes it's 20 calls to have one person answer you. So
Yeah.
it's a difficult task. It's like when you're going out to run, that first 10 minutes of running or first 3 minutes of running is total torture. Putting your running clothes on sometimes total torture just to get out there, and then you start doing it and it's okay. So anyways, that's my long introduction.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, yeah, there's definitely. I mean, obviously, like we said, the importance is that for most businesses, that's how they fill the pipeline, right? Like a lot of businesses don't have a strong inbound strategy that brings in enough leads. And growing customer accounts is good, but you also need net new accounts. So I think that's the importance of it. But like you said, I think prospecting is hard. You know what I mean? Like I think there's a lot of and just the mechanism of it, right? Like you said, 20 calls to get one person, or like 50 emails, or you know what I mean? Like there's a lot to do. It's really difficult to break from the crowd. I mean, when we talked about content with Alyssa a little while ago, like I mean, now we got to create content. Like it's very demanding, and it's easy for a salesperson to be like, especially when their pipeline's full, right? You were mentioning that at some point. that my pipeline's full, why would I put in all this effort when I'm just, I'm going to get shot down, I'm going to get nowhere. Like it could get depressing, right? Prospecting can get quite depressing. So you're not on a high because your pipeline's, moving forward and you have a lot of opportunities. Like, why am I going to go depress myself to, by prospecting and doing something that's difficult? And and I find too, and maybe that's a good segue to the next question that I wanted to talk about, which is like how can sales leaders help their teams prospect? Um, Ironically, I find like one challenge that I see a lot, other than the ones that we said, is that reps don't know where to get started, right? Because like they're not building a habit of prospecting, right? They're doing prospecting when they absolutely have to, and I find a lot of reps just don't know where to get started, right? They kind of go through their CRM. They're like, wait, who should I be calling again? If they go to their tasks, they're late in all these tasks because their pipeline was full, so they didn't prospect. So now they're late. Do I start over? Stuff like that. So I find that's a big challenge too. Is like they just don't know where to get started, and maybe that's an excuse for not wanting to do it. I don't know. What do you
Well,
think?
uh, listen, it's definitely an excuse, but like most human beings, we go to the easiest thing, right? So prospecting is not the easiest thing. Prospecting is one of the harder things. So
Yeah,
prospecting is like when you're on a diet and you have to not eat the cookie and there's a plate of cookies in front of you.
yeah,
You have to control yourself and say, okay, I'm not going to eat these cookies. And you have to control yourself in prospecting. Say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write my emails or do my calls. And what often happens there is you say, oh, well, my CRM's not as tight and clean as it should be. So I'm going to go clean that up and then I'll prospect. Or my sales pitch is not quite as good as I'd like it to be. So I'll practice that and then I'll go prospect. So you find all these excuses to get there.
mm,
Or, I'll work out tomorrow. Today's Sunday and I'm just going to sit down and have dinner and I'll work out tomorrow. Whereas if you just get into the habit, and here's the biggest thing, if you just get into the habit of prospecting, if you literally put it in your calendar, and we've talked about this before, and you don't even
yeah,
think about it, you just say, okay, today at 9 o'clock from 9 to 10, I'm just going to do my prospecting, my cold call, my emails, whatever it is you're doing, answer the warm leads, whatever it might be. And I'm just going to put that in my calendar and I'm going to do it. Then it becomes a habit that is just in you. So I don't know about you. I think you work out, but twice a week I go to this special gym, and at first it was tough. I have to get up early on Wednesday morning and on Saturday morning. Now I don't even think about it. It's just there. It's in my
hmm
calendar. So that's my workout prospecting, right? So
yeah,
and that's the real trick to prospecting often is not in the actions you need to do while you're prospecting, because a lot of people are actually pretty good on the phone. A lot of people are pretty good at writing the emails. The real issue is that they're not doing the activity. They're
mm,
just not doing it on a regular basis.
yeah,
Which brings me to the word prospecting comes from, remember, people used to prospect for gold. So they would sit there on the
yeah,
side of the river and they would pan for gold for hours on end. And the ones, of course, you could get lucky and find a big gold nugget. But let's face it, in the early years, if you just sat out there, 10 hours a day or whatever, 12 hours a day or whatever it was, and eventually you were going to find something. And that's what
mm,
prospecting is. You got to tell yourself, as you do the habit and you do more and more of it, you're going to start knowing your own ratios.
right,
And once you know your own ratios, well, then you're going to know I need to make 10 calls usually to get one good one. So you're making those calls and then boom, it starts happening and you understand what's going on. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I've got a
yeah.
lot to say about this. So I know you're trying
No,
to
but
say
that's
something.
good.
Shut up and listen.
No, that was good, and I mean, like, I think you're right. I think it's, um, yeah, building that habit is quite difficult, especially like you did mention, and we both mentioned. It's probably one of the most difficult tasks. I think, even if you're good on the phone, even if you're good with people, there's this massive perceived gap between talking to somebody and doing like a demo or a discovery call or whatever your first stage is, and getting there. I think that's just difficult. And and you brought up not prospecting. You brought up working out, which is interesting. So I do work out. I do it, and I have a personal trainer, and I find like that's made the whole difference, right? You're accountable to somebody else, and I find as a sales leader, I think that's if prospecting is required of your reps to build their pipeline, I think that's what you need to be. You need to be help them stay accountable to
You need to be the
getting
trainer.
their stuff done. Yeah, you need to be the trainer. You need to go in and like, hey, where are your prospecting calls? Like and looking at your
Or
all of your
okay, or I'll
activities.
listen to you. Okay, let's we'll do one together. I'll show you how to do this rep. And then you do
Yeah,
it. I'll show you how to do this exercise. Well, the exercise is let's work on that cold call, and then you go and do some. You can even create a little self competition.
yeah,
There's a lot. You're totally right. And you said something that I really like is you said you have a personal trainer, right? I go to this
yeah,
what do you call it, circuit training gym where I literally go there and I don't think for an hour because the
yeah,
person tells me exactly what exercise to do. Because that I was really bad at that. I was really bad at
yeah,
and I would spend 15 minutes sitting there. Okay, which one should I do next? Should I do the legs, the
yeah,
arms, the whatever? And now it's just like, okay, do this, do that. I'm like, okay, just do it. So if you're a
yeah, and
good coach,
they help push you, right? Like,
yeah,
if you
yeah,
go work out by yourself, it's like, okay, well, I'll do 10 reps. I think that's good. My
yeah,
legs are a little sore now, but they'll be like, no, you'll do 50. It's fine. You
yeah,
can do it. Right. Whereas like, so as a sales leader, it's like, okay, I'll do one call. Like, no, 10, you can do it. Come on.
yeah, yeah,
Here's your list. Let's do it. I'll sit here with you. No judgment. I'll give you advice if,
yeah.
or coaching or whatever as you
Or
go.
I'll
I
even
think,
do some with you. I'll do some with
or
you,
I'll do
right?
some
You
with
do
you.
5 and I'll do 1. Every 5 that
Yeah.
you do, I'll do 1. Like you could get it. You can get into the if you're the manager or the team lead or whatever, you can get into the bullpen with them and help them out. And then you can coach each
Yeah.
other. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and I
But
think also as yeah,
and if it's a
go for it.
habit and you do that first of all, as a manager, if you create that habit with your team, that's great, right? And that's wonderful. It gets things going. So let me tell you about something that happened to me in my early career that probably influenced me for the rest of my career. I was very young. I was just out of university. I started my first sales job, and I was sitting in a group of people, and I didn't know if I was a good salesperson. I knew nothing about sales, like literally nothing.
Yeah,
But the manager at the time was really good. He says, next Tuesday, we're going to have a competition on who can book the most appointments. So we each had our list and we would call and we would try to book the most appointments for the next, I forget, like week or 2 weeks. And back then I
right.
remember we'd try to get 10 appointments a week. So we'd have one in the morning, one in the afternoon, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're selling telecom long distance services when they deregulated in 1990. Yes, I'm old. So,
Yeah,
so I remember we got on the phone and I knew nothing. So there we were. We're all sitting in our little cubicles next to each other and we're all trying to maximize. And I remember I was so proud of myself that I'd gotten 10 appointments. And I was the first one to get my 10 appointments. I was like, wow, I'm good at something. One, it felt good. And it was fun because they'd sort of shown us back then how to do a cold call. And we were all together. So it made it fun. It was a fun activity. We all went to lunch afterwards. We laughed, but we were all proud because we'd done something. It was something that was hard to do. So I remember on a
yeah,
regular basis, it would be in our schedule, like once a month or twice a month, we would have this competition to book as many meetings as possible. So that's something you can do as a trainer too. That's a habit. And
yeah,
I forget, like the competition was I came in first, but like I think I got a handshake, that was it. But it was fun. It
yeah,
was for competitive people who are in sales. It was fun, and those that had a harder time, well, then the manager would go with them and talk to them and try to help them out and be better at it. So it's all about just scheduling it, creating the habit, and doing the activity. And most people are way better at cold calling than they think they are.
yeah,
And it's just a question of they don't feel like it, or they're embarrassed, or they're shy. But you learn that those few things will be good at. Most people are better at cold emailing than they think. Most people are better at LinkedIn poking than they think. It's usually just a little habit you can tweak, and get better at it. But you need to create that habit. My God, I'm talking a lot today. Sorry, Fab.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. And there's something that you said that I liked, which was like most people are better at cold calling, cold emailing, whatever, than they think they are. And it's the same thing as working out, right? Most people can actually lift more, run
Yes.
longer, whatever, than they
Yeah.
think they can. Obviously, it's a practice and you get better over time, like
Except for those
prospecting.
that got the heart attacks.
Yeah, except for those. But and I think as a sales leader too, obviously, like I'm on an operational side of things. I mean, I think you still need the tools and the techniques you mentioned. Like they trained you how to do cold calling. Like I think there's the repetition, being there with your reps, looking at their numbers, training them, coaching them. But I think you need to have all those tools available, right? And I think there's just because at the end of the day, without the tools, because we're in a day and age where we can collect data, and the more data we have, the more we can be better at it. Same thing with training, right? Like the more you can measure
Yeah,
your heart rates and all that, the more you
yeah,
can evaluate success. I think as a sales leader, and I find maybe I have my too much of an operational, CRM hat on, but I find like that's a big struggle that sales leaders have is providing the tools necessary, right? Like they'll just be like, how many calls did you do today, and that's it, and like, but there's no insight, there's no flavor to that, there's no looking at like, oh wait, this guy's, I don't know if this is the best example, but he's just dialing the phone numbers on his cell phone, and that's taking forever. It's long. It's like but maybe we can get a dialer involved. Maybe there's some automated like things to like make it easier, and like you say, so we can focus more on the joy of it, or the pleasure of it, or the competition of it, as opposed to the hassles of it. Like we can't find the leads in the CRM. We don't know where the things are, and all that stuff.
yeah. No, and that's a good point. Is that if you look at the data, it'll help you get better at what you do. So one thing I do want to touch on, and data is super important. But if you don't know what you're doing and you're just doing a shot in the dark, human beings naturally are looking for the easiest way to accomplish something. Like the wheel was
Yeah,
invented to carry a cart because the cart was hard to drag along the gravel. And then some guy said, "Hey, axle, two wheels. It's way easier to carry this cart." And then so on and so forth with every technological advancement. So if you use that data to help you be more efficient, well, then it'll create more efficiency, which will help you in getting more, if you're prospecting, getting more appointments or getting more demos or whatever it is you're trying to do. Um, and that's important. So I totally agree with you that using that data is way more useful than just saying, "Hey, how many calls did you do?" Because it's
yeah,
not just about the numbers of calls; it's about the data you can get behind it and how you can use it. Right? There is there
yeah.
is.
Because yeah,
So sorry,
go for
go
it.
go ahead, and then I'll go for my thing after.
No, because I was saying that's it. The data, like beyond like how many calls did you do? I could say like, hey, I've done 65 calls today, and Paul has done 35. But let's look at the results as well, right? I might have done 65 calls and not booked anything. You did 35, but booked 10. And it might be a fluke, right? That you just landed on the right people, the right. But if you look at trends over time, and like, wait, like Fab's doing a lot, but not getting a lot of results, and Paul's doing less, but getting a lot of results, and we could start looking at what the differences are, and we could start building training and development programs based off of these benchmarks and best practices that you're
Yeah,
identifying through the data.
yeah. And that data is wonderful, and you're right. So there's really two things, right? So there's your actions. So your obviously your data will give you how many calls and whatnot that you
Yeah.
did, and then your method. Well, hey, how come John's so much better than Sarah, but Sarah's like 10 times better than George, and Mia is the best one of all? And then you look, well, what are they doing? Well, that then if they're all doing the same amount of calls, then you're looking at method, right? What is it that's being said, and how are they doing? So I want to give a little trick here for when you're prospecting is that you quickly want, if you're doing a cold call or an email or LinkedIn outreach, well, mostly LinkedIn outreach. Let's say if you're doing a LinkedIn outreach or you're doing cold call, you quickly want to ascertain whether this is the right prospect for you. So how you qualify them. But you also quickly, if you're doing a cold call, you quickly want to hand the talking stick to them, right? You want to make them talk. So in that in that state of mind, I want people to think of how can I quickly pass the baton to them, and what's most important. So I'm not sure we've mentioned this in the past, but I've got three numbers in my head. I've got 7, 38, and 55. So there's this doctor who did an analysis the 70s. I think we've talked about this in the past, but I'll talk about it again. And when you're chatting with someone, 7% of what they remember of what you said in a casual conversation will be the content, the words you used. 38% will come from your tone of voice, and 55% will come from the body language. So keep
Mm.
that in mind, that in the first few minutes when you're prospecting, it's all how you make that other person feel, which is what's going to determine whether they engage with you or tune out as quickly as possible. So if you
Right.
work on that method part and you're making sure you're engaging with them with things that are important to them, and the way you do that is to ask open questions quickly, well, that's method you need to consider, plus your habits. Well, you've put those together, you've got everything that you can control, because in sales there's three elements. There's your actions, how much you do of something and what you do. There's your method, what you say, what you write. And then there's the third part, the third ingredient, which is the client, the economy, the things you don't control. So the things you
Right.
don't control, you don't control. They might influence you. Like you might, if you know right now that no one's interested in Bitcoin, well, it's going to be harder for you to sell Bitcoin. But
Right.
if it's super strong, well, then maybe it'll go up. But your method needs to be affected by that. But ultimately, you only control your action and your method. The client or the economy, you need to, at a certain point, ignore so that you can just focus on your actions and your method. And
Mm.
that's really what we're saying today, is that prospecting is about your habits, your actions, putting those, going to the gym. And then your method is, well, what are the reps you're doing? What are the exercises you're doing? How are you doing them to build, if you want to build as much bulk or if you want to build strength? Well, this is all your method, what you're saying and what you're doing. So
Right.
these things both need to be looked at. And often, Fab, people forget the method. They don't work on the
Right.
method. They just say, go do your calls, but they don't say, what are you
Yeah.
saying during your calls? So that's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. And we've talked about, like that's where, sales leaders and their ops teams, if they have some, can come in handy, building those playbooks and helping them identify the metrics that you want to follow, right? We have the activity metrics. I think those are usually easier to follow because every CRM at this point tracks them super easily. But that's it. Those method data points are a little harder to get, right? And so we talked about like playbooks and whatnot. I think those, it's true, are often forgotten because they are harder to get, and so operational people tend to go towards what's easier, activity stuff. Sales leaders look at, because there's still, I mean, at a certain point it's true, right? The more you do, the more you'll get, right? As you were mentioning before, the analogy with the gold prospecting is like at some point you'll find gold nuggets. There might not be a lot, but the more you do, the more chance that you have of finding something. But there is what you're saying and what you're doing in there too. That's important to stay on
Yeah.
top of. Like
Yeah.
which playbooks are being used. What copy is being sent. Like all this stuff like that. That matters, right? It does
Yeah.
matter because I could send 112 really shitty emails. And maybe I'll get a couple because it's 112 and it's a lot for a day. But I might be able to bring that down to 62 because I have much better verbiage or wording
Yeah.
or whatever messaging to
Methodology.
share.
Yeah. Method. Yeah.
Yeah,
Method.
exactly.
It's and
Yeah,
just to bring it back to the gold prospector analogy. So the prospector has to go there for the 10 hours a day. But if he's using a spoon to do his panning, it's going to take, he might be out there 12 hours a day, using the spoon looking for gold, but he's probably better off using a big pan because he can fit more rocks in there. So that's his
yeah,
method. So is she using the big pan or is she using a spoon? So that's the difference. That's where your method comes in. She's out there, she's
yeah,
doing it 12 hours a day, but you're going, hey, how come Jillian is like finding 5 times more gold than Mary? Well, Mary's using spoon and Jillian's using a huge pan. Okay, well, that makes
yeah,
sense. So these are the things, it's very simplified, but these are the two things you really have to look at. And to come back to our gym analogy, because we both go to the gym, when I walk into the gym, I know that my teacher knows, what we're trying to do as a group, cardio and a little bit of muscle. So she'll do whatever it is to make us work there. Now, if I was like,
Yeah.
25 years old or 18 years old, and I was like, and all I wanted is to be Mr. Universe like Arnold Schwarzenegger, we wouldn't be using the same method. Maybe I'd still be in the gym,
Yeah.
whatever, for that hour, but we would, I'd be pumping a lot more iron than the cardio we're doing. So it's
Yeah.
really, what are the results you're trying to get? The action's good, but what is the results? And like with
Yeah.
anything, and like me, the hardest thing when you're getting into this habit is the night before, when you're trying to find every excuse in the world not to go to the
Oh
gym
yeah.
the next day, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's about the actions and the method.
Yeah. And so if we recap a bit, I think, obviously prospecting is important. I think, but like, I think we just, again, take key takeaways. Prospecting is important. I mean, it's still a big part of building a company or a sales reps pipeline. I think the challenges there are many, but at the end of the day, it's difficult. And so when things difficult, it's always easy to find an excuse to not do it, right? You mentioned working out. We live in Canada. It's way below freezing today. There's a snowstorm. It's raining, cats and dogs. Like, there's so many reasons to not do it. Or like you were saying before, like, I don't know what exercises to do. I get bored halfway through. I'm not seeing results. I'm like, like, there's so many different factors that come into play as to why prospecting is so difficult. With the low response rates, not being able to find your data, difficulty finding decision makers. Not getting hung up. There's so many things that are making it more difficult. So I think as a sales leader, I think you can help, like, maybe along, you know, three ways. I think there's building a strategy. We talked about LinkedIn, we talked about BB, and like there's maybe better ways to helping you guide your reps a little bit more. But then there's also the training and the coaching that you're going to do, right? Be acting as that personal trainer, helping them see the results that
Yep.
they need to get. Um, and so you do that through coaching, but you also provide the tools necessary. Identify the roadblocks. Try to remove as many excuses as possible, because some are maybe more valid than others. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about the data stuff, is like you just finished off on your activity, tracking your activities, the sales activities, I should say, but tracking the methodology as well, like what's being said and how is it being said. And there's always some stuff that's a little harder, right? You're not going to put some video analysis software on their camera to see how their body language is, but there's some things that you can measure in terms of methodology, like with what's being said in the emails, what playbooks are being used, and whatnot. Does that
Yeah,
sum it up?
yeah, that sums it up really, really well. Maybe the last thing I'd say on just the one last thing I'd like to just clarify on methodology as a sales leader, and if you really want to help people with method, and that I've done a few LinkedIn things on this, and I think we've talked about it, and we should probably do a whole session on this. Is role play. Um,
Yeah.
that's the best way. Coaching and role play is the best way to get your people to practice and get better. Get them on the ice. So you'll hear me say this a ton of times, but it's where you get the most mileage for your effort, or the most bang for your buck. So yeah, that's the only thing that I would add is, don't forget to role play and help them out. And that's the best way to increase someone's methodology at whatever stage, prospecting,
Yeah.
discovery, it's all important. So yeah, that's that. No, I think you rounded that off. You summarized the points really well.
Awesome. Paul, always a pleasure.
Yes, Fab, it's always a
Talk to you
pleasure.
soon.
Yes.
All right. Take care. I'll
Ciao,
talk to you
everyone.
soon. Bye, everybody.